Welcome back to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. When was the last time you struck up a conversation with a stranger out in public? Or the last time you dropped by to say hello to a senior citizen in your life, like a parent, aunt, uncle, or grandparent? If you're a senior, do you see your relatives as much as you'd like? Today, we're talking about the benefits of talking to people face to face, even if they're strangers. And it has us wondering if you are one of those people who seeks out conversations with strangers, or do you avoid them? The phone lines are open, 313-577-1019.
And Robin, there is mounting evidence that having real-life interactions with other people is good for our health and happiness. In 2023, former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued an advisory warning that isolation poses a health risk equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That is wild. Wow. We're going to start the conversation today talking about our elders and what visiting, connecting, and socializing does for their health and happiness. Here to help us better understand the importance of in-person conversation and community for seniors is Kayla Perry, the Marketing and Communications Manager at the Detroit Area Agency on Aging. Kayla, welcome to the Metro.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So starting things out, how does the Detroit Area Agency for Aging support seniors and foster social activities?
Well, in our 45 years of rich history in serving the seniors at the Metro Detroit area, we provide education, resources, and the like to seniors to improve their overall quality of life. And a number of ways that we do that is we support programming and services and activities that are implemented through our wellness centers. So seniors or centers like St. Pat's or the Helm or the Hannon Center, they provide a number of activities to our seniors that create connectivity and get them physically moving and foster relationship building.
And Kayla, what kinds of activities do folks do when they work with you?
We do a number of events. So we offer, like St. Pat's, for example, they offer hustle classes. They offer digital literacy classes. For us, for example, our health and wellness and nutrition program, they do a program throughout the summer. It's called the Silver Cafe, which was implemented post-COVID to kind of re-engage seniors that were homebound, needing that engagement, needing that connectivity. So we offer not only an opportunity for them to come out and get connected and create new friendships, maintain current friendships, but also receive wraparound care and services.
And, just thinking about socializing and the importance of just being around people, not even, honestly, sometimes not even talking, just being in presence of other folks. Why are socializing and friendships such good things for physical and mental health, not just for all people, but especially for seniors?
For the senior community, it's extremely important and relative because we know as you age, sometimes we find that seniors have a tendency to maybe keep to themselves. So having that level of connectivity or having those friendships or even connecting with a stranger can increase endorphins. And we all know when you feel good or when you feel well, you do well. So it increases not only their ability to connect and engage with others, but it increases their physical activity and their need to participate in physical activities like working out, taking a walk, going for a walk, and it increases their mental capabilities as well. And
Kayla, really quickly, we're just going to head to the phone lines really quickly. We have Satrice here in Detroit, and you work at the St. Patrick Senior Center. How important are social social events and social activities when we talk about elders?
Extremely important. It just gives them motivation to eat better, to be more active, to think, to stretch themselves. And so them being active and participating in events just increases their overall health.
And when we just talk about this, of course, the importance of that, because I know oftentimes isolation leads to so many different things in terms of your health and detrimental to your health. So can you talk about how being physical, how honestly being out there in public spaces and places, especially for seniors' social lives, is important?
It motivates them to, I would say, even to move. When we see some of those seniors here participate in our programs, dance classes and exercise classes, it helps them expand their circle of friends. And we know as we age, our circle of friends gets smaller.
Yes. I want to say thank you so much to Satrice for calling in today from the St. Patrick Senior Center. And as well, Kayla, just if you could just answer or respond to what Satrice just talked about just getting out there, just being active as a senior.
Yes, getting active and being active as a senior, it does provide motivation for them and encouragement. I believe once seniors begin to participate in physical activity, they are more inclined to stay active, and not only stay active, but foster new relationships and friendships through that physical activity, which we find is something that is important among seniors, movement and engagement and connectivity.
You're listening to The Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about the importance of face-to-face conversations, especially for seniors. Our guest is Kayla Perry, Marketing and Communications Director at the Detroit Area Agency for Aging. Kayla, what would you say people misunderstand about seniors' social lives?
I believe that the misconception is that seniors may not want to be bothered as they age, but that is not true, or that they are home alone, and sometimes that's not the case. If you get out, you'll see them participate at events at St. Pat's, for example, as I've said, in physical activity courses and hustle classes, and it's such an amazing thing to still see that seniors are out thriving and living and making those connections and being engaged, because it's such a benefit as we age.
I want to emphasize what you just said, though, Kayla, at the beginning, which is that seniors largely don't see it as a bother to be chatted up or to be engaged with from others.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for us, we encourage that. We encourage that through our programming and funding. So we present a senior fashion show, for example, that allows seniors to come out, not only get dressed, but it provides visibility. It provides an opportunity for them to connect with each other as well. In addition to that, we support an event through the city of Detroit, the Senior Friendship Days, that also provides an opportunity for them to come out, be active, engage, do hustles, foster new friendships, receive resources, and things of the like.
And they do hustles. Talk about the hustle classes.
Yes, it's a beautiful thing to see, again, how they engage and how acclimated they are and physically agile. I've learned a few hustles myself from them, and the quickness and the flow and how fluid they are, to just see that and the physical activity and the movement among those seniors is just a beautiful thing to see, especially in larger groups and spaces and settings like the Senior Friendship Day that typically happens in the summer.
And let's speed up from the hustle to talk about technology and how that's affecting seniors. Are you noticing older folks using social media to stay in touch? Are there ways that you see technology can really help foster connection for seniors?
Yes, it's interesting to see as technology begins to evolve. And I think that's something on the heels of the pandemic kind of urged us all to engage differently and connect in various forms. So to see seniors engage through social media, like going live, creating reels, creating content that is specific to that audience is interesting to see. Yes, some individuals require a little more time to get acclimated in that space. But again, St. Pat offers digital literacy classes that teach seniors how to navigate technology, how to use technology to also create another avenue of connection among seniors.
What are some examples? Okay, so the folks who are going live, they're doing reels on Instagram, let's say. What are they going live and talking about?
a lot of what we see is just a lot of physical activities. Some are going for walks and just sharing content on nature walks. Some are providing tips on how to stay active and ways that they stay active. And some are providing hustle lessons.
Nice. Let's go back to the phones. Joe in Rochester Hills, thanks for calling the Metro. Do you strike up conversations with strangers?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Hey, love your show, by the way.
Hey, Joe.
Your previous folks from Coup d'etat, I'm going to go check them out next week just because you guys had them on.
Excellent.
Anyway.
Excellent, Joe. Yeah. Tell us about, what have you seen as the benefits to striking up conversations with strangers?
Well, it's just, you get a smiling face, you get a happy look. Almost always. I mean, it's, I'm out and about. I walk, my daughter's a school teacher in Royal Oak. I live in Rochester Hills, but I take her dog during the week when she's working because, school teachers, they don't work 9 to 5,
Right.
So I take them and we walk Royal Oak in the morning, which is what I'm doing right now. And we just bumped into, at the apartments, there was a gentleman there cleaning the windows. So we stopped and chatted with him for a minute. And he had a smile on his face, and just said, hello, how's it going? And, everything good. And then we moved on. But, I run into this all the time when I walk the dog. And he's 10 years old. And my daughter bought him when he was 9, got him when he had a kill center. So I've been walking him for 9 years, Monday through Friday for her. And so I bump into all kind of people. We go in Royal Oak here, part of our route, we go by Main Street, Royal Oak there by Crispelli's. We walk around the back, and there's one gentleman there that comes out and gives Frank a massage. That's Franklin's the dog's name. And then we chatted up for a minute. And he has dogs, right? So we talked about dogs, and one of his dogs passed like 6 months ago. And if you had anybody who's had a pet, it's part of the family, right? So you kind of console with them, and it's just great.
Joe.
And it's all kind of cool stuff,
Yeah, it sounds like talking to strangers for you is something that enhances your life, and it sounds like it enhances the lives of the people that you interact with.
Yesterday I'm walking, and I'm just going to bring this up. We weren't talking to anybody, but I told somebody about it afterwards that has one of these cars. There's a Tesla parked in somebody's driveway, right? And so they had a bumper sticker on the back, and it said, "I bought this before the drama."
Yep, there have been quite a few of those stickers we've been hearing about, and maybe we'll discuss those on a later show. Joe in Rochester Hills, thank you so much for calling the Metro. And Kayla Perry, Marketing and Communications Manager at the Detroit Area Agency on Aging, thank you so much for talking about seniors and ways that we can connect with them and ways that they are trying to connect with others.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And we want to hear from you. How do you feel about talking to strangers? Does it enhance your life? Are you someone who shies away from it? Give us a call, 313-577-1019. This is the Metro. Stay with us.
Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about talking to strangers.
Yes.
Tia Graham.
Yeah. And Robin, I just wanted to know, for you, are you a person who sits and talks to strangers or do you are you like me? Headphones on, head down.
I am someone who really enjoys talking to strangers. I do a lot of walking, and I have found that I now sort of crave that dopamine fix. And it first starts with like, I like to make eye contact with people and acknowledge people on the street and exchange pleasantries. Hey, how you doing? You know, very common in the city. But I do try to take it a little bit further and start with some small talk. And I feel like you got to start somewhere. A lot of folks will say, I don't like small talk, but you got to start with small talk in order to get to the bigger ideas. I think.
I'm trying to work through awkwardness. I'm a little awkward. I don't know how to keep small talk going. After a while, I'm just kind of like, yeah.
You do it all the time.
All the
on
time,
this
I
show.
just trail off. I'm just like, yeah. Oh, the talking, I know, but in real life, it's awkward, and I'm just like, oh, well, I don't know what to say after a while, so I don't know what to do. But I will say, just before we move on to our next guest here. My mom is the perfect example of someone who knows how to speak to strangers. She goes to the stores, and all the people know her there in the stores who work there, and there are other customers who know who my mom is because she's open and she talks to almost every person who talks to her. So I really do have to follow her example and her lead. So shout out to Ms. Graham there.
Definite shout out to your mom.
Yeah.
And also, though, like, have you talked to her about why she's so open to doing that?
No. I just think, that's just who she is. I never really asked, like, hey, why do you talk to strangers as much as you do? And why do they know who you are? But, that's just who she is. She's just a really open, happy person. So, yeah.
Okay, this is something for you, our listener, to think about. We want you to think about the last place you were in public. It could have been the grocery store or the bus or in the waiting room at the doctor's office, let's say. Okay, so are you there now? Did you have a conversation with anyone, and a real conversation where maybe you learned a little bit about someone? Or did you not talk to anyone at all, and why not? And also, I will say, let's not diminish small talk. Like, yes, a real conversation is great, but maybe you just exchanged a few lines and then things sort of fizzled out. I think that counts for something, too.
Okay.
If you did manage to strike up a conversation with a stranger, how did it make you feel? According to our next guest, Nick Epley, it probably made you feel better.
And you probably didn't even know it. Nick is a professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. He's authored numerous articles on the ways we interact with each other, and he co-authored a very influential study on talking to strangers that produced some very interesting results. Professor Epley, thanks for joining us on the Metro.
Hi, Tia and Robin. Thanks for having me here.
Of course. So, what did you find out with the study, digging into the study first? Why are we talking to strangers will make you happier? About a decade ago, you co-authored a very influential and eye-opening study called Mistakenly Seeking Solitude. So what did all of this come together? Like all of these study, the data, everything that you were able to amass, what did you find out?
Well, the motivation for the research was trying to figure out what seems like a paradox or a puzzle to us as psychologists, and that is that we tend to be highly social people. We're made happier and healthier when we reach out and engage and connect with each other. And yet, if you just look out in public, often we're not doing that. That is, we don't seem to be as social as maybe might be optimal for our well-being. And I noticed this one morning when I was sitting on my train coming into the south side of Chicago, where we've got a train load of people who are made happier and healthier typically by connecting with each other, and yet everybody was sitting there in silence. And what we found as one potential explanation for why we sometimes get ourselves in those situations is that we've found consistently that people tend to underestimate how positive they'll feel when they actually reach out to try to connect or engage with another person in conversation. Talking with strangers tends to be surprisingly positive, we found.
Wow. And how did you actually set this experiment up? Because here in Detroit, of course, our public transit is not as great as it is in Chicago. So why did you choose public transit, buses, and trains?
Well, only because those were the places where we could run these experiments. They don't have to be on public transportation per se. You're sitting in a doctor's waiting room there by yourself. There are other people around. Those are opportunities to connect. Maybe you take them, maybe you don't. These were just places where we had access to people who were kind of sitting in silent spaces. And our question was, what would happen if we actually asked those people to reach out and connect with somebody? So what we did was we recruited people to participate in our experiment at a train station or at a bus station in a study with buses. And we asked them either to keep to themselves on the train that morning, to just enjoy their solitude. That's our solitude condition. We randomly assign them to do whatever they normally do. That's the control condition. Or we ask them to reach out and connect with a stranger. At the end, we ask them to tell us how it actually made them feel. And what we found was that those who were randomly assigned to the condition where they reached out to try to talk to a stranger actually reported having the most positive commute. And those in the solitude condition who we asked to keep to themselves actually reported having the least positive commute. So those who reached out to talk to a stranger actually felt better than those who didn't. And again, they're randomly assigned a condition here, so it's not like they're choosing these things. But when we asked people to predict how they would feel if they were in each of those conditions, they actually predicted the opposite. They predicted that keeping to themselves would make them happier than reaching out and connect with a stranger. And as far as we can tell, those expectations were backwards. We're just wrong.
And, recently I was on the social scrolling, doing the things that we do, staying away from other people and secluding ourselves in our little silos. I was doing that recently, and someone said that AI and what AI they think could do. And this is something that, once again, this is just an idea, but the invention and the usage of AI could possibly bring us more together, because we're trying to figure out if things are actually real or not, if this email is real, if this message is real. Do you think that that's something that AI could possibly do?
So AI and all this technology are just tools, and in theory, they could be used to do anything. In practice, what companies do are they try to make money with them, and what that means is causing us to spend more time on those apps than less time on them. And so, yes, in theory, they could be made to prompt us to reach out and engage with other real people more often. In practice, the money is made when you're sitting there staring at your screen. So I'm a little doubtful in practice that that's going to work out.
And, going back to the study, were the results of the study what you expected? Did you expect people to feel better, even if they predicted interactions to have a negative impact on their mood?
We did, yeah. We had lots of reasons. We had lots of reasons in the field, from research over decades to suggest that they should feel better, reaching out and connecting with other people. But when you're running research, you're always a little unsure yourself of what's actually going to happen in this context. There could always be exceptions to general rules. And there may still be exceptions here, places where reaching out and engaging with strangers actually isn't as positive as you as keeping to yourself. But we just haven't found those places yet. What we found is that people are generally overly pessimistic about how interested other people are in engaging with them. One of your previous callers noted this about seniors, that seniors are actually more interested in engaging than you might expect them to be. We find that's generally true with people out there in the world, whether they're seniors or not. Other people are more social than we think and respond more positively when we reach out to them than we'd guess.
And what do you mean by out there in the world? Like those who are actually are going out, maybe taking walks or going to the stores or just doing things outside of their home?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Just when we're out there in public, the places where we're actually able to interact with people we don't otherwise know. That's what I mean.
Yeah, and for yourself, after you did the study, did you start talking to strangers a little bit more, or did you see yourself feeling better after you started to speak to strangers?
Yeah, so I will say that no research has ever changed the way I live my own life more than this work. It made me notably more sociable. And I should say our research doesn't suggest that you should be out there talking up everybody all the time, no matter how you're feeling. Our data just suggests that other people respond more favorably than you might imagine when you reach out to them, that you can uplift other people more than you might guess. And what that does, what I think the implication of that is that you've just got a lot more power to engage people in positive ways than you might imagine. And once you know that, you start to see opportunities to reach out that you wouldn't have noticed before. And you just find yourself doing this more often than you might have otherwise. So yeah, I do this a lot more than I used to.
Yeah. And why are people so pessimistic about their expectations for talking to strangers?
So part of it is that the world is kind of a terrible teacher for us. So if you're somebody who's pessimistic to begin with, you're a little nervous, this person's not talking to you, so you might infer that they're not interested in talking to you. You won't reach out and find out that you're wrong. And so pessimism has a way of being reinforced out there in the world in a way that doesn't get corrected. And so if you're not reaching out to other people and trying to engage in that with them, those beliefs, even if they're mistaken, tend to be self-fulfilling. And I think that's one big reason why we tend to be overly pessimistic. The folks who spend a lot of time talking with other people, reaching out and engaging, they've learned how to do that. Tia, your mother knows that when you reach out to other people, they tend to respond favorably. That's why she does it, because she knows better. But if you don't do this, if you're pessimistic, that belief tends to be self-fulfilling.
This hits home really hard right now because I have not been a good friend. I have not reached out like I should, and I've been a little secluded. So thank you for the tip there. You're listening to The Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about the benefits of talking with strangers. Our guest is Nick Epley. He's a professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. And we're also taking your calls. The number is 313-577-1019. Let's go to the phones to Ed in Detroit. Ed, hi.
Yeah.
Hi. Do you go out of your way to talk to strangers?
Well, Robin and Tia, after following your previous guest, Nick, it's kind of hard to even express after he stole all my thunder.
Oh.
But no, I understand where Robin is coming from. You know, the eyes are the window to the soul. Now, I used to live in the suburbs, West Bloomfield, but I bought an investment in a place downtown around Greektown because I wanted to give back to the city because the city had been very good to me. And the mayor's done, in my humble opinion, a very good job of bringing the place back. But if you don't know people's history, and some people have a good history and some people have a bad history with people of other color in Detroit. But if you meet them in the eye, and you meet them with a smile and eye contact, and if they greet you back with the same thing, game on.
Okay, fair enough. Game on. Thank you so much for calling, Ed in Detroit. I mean, I think about when I was living in downtown Detroit, and I felt like a lot of folks were just really open to chatting me up, and I had a lot of those. I exchanged, Tia Graham, you agree.
I didn't agree that I would be the one that's doing the socializing, but I do notice it a lot more in downtown Detroit. People are a lot more open to talking to one another.
They are. And it does remind me, Professor Epley, of something you said about how talking with strangers, you can powerfully affect a person's day and have this ability to sort of uplift them. And I think my own experiences, having a bad day and then interacting with someone who said something nice to me and, perhaps a quick conversation ensued, that had the power to totally change my day, to totally turn it around. And I think I've taken that with me. I've put that into my pocket when I am walking around in the city. Professor Epley, it's one thing, though, to convince someone that initiating a conversation with a stranger is going to make them happier. But what about the people we're actually striking up conversations with? If it's so common for people to avoid talking with strangers, isn't this idea kind of an intrusion into people's privacy? Should we think differently about what kinds of privacy we're even entitled to in public spaces?
Yeah, I mean, you can think about being open and willing to interact with other people as an invitation, right? That if you say hi to somebody and they say hi to you back and you start talking with them, if they don't want to talk with you, that sometimes happens. It's actually not surprisingly uncommon. Think about what happens if somebody reaches out positively to you. Robin, you noted when somebody says hi to you and has a nice conversation, that's usually uplifting. That's the way it is for most of us. But not everybody wants to talk. Every now and then I'll sit down next to somebody who doesn't seem, willing to visit or doesn't want to talk. And that's fine. You just move on. You let that pass. And it's not a bad thing. It just is. You just let it pass. But I think the way I think about sociality, and at least the way we study it in our research, is that people are open to engaging and they're willing to invite people into a conversation. So you're not forcing anything on anybody. You're just opening up an opportunity.
Professor Epley, I want to talk a little bit about the assumptions that we tend to make about people, especially people we don't know. I mean, whether we like it or not, it kind of seems like human nature to make some, we'll call them educated guesses about people, right? And at the same time, we know that can be a bit dangerous. That's a slippery slope into prejudice for sure. Is it human nature to make assumptions about strangers? And would you say that this is another reason that it's so vital to have interactions with strangers? Because oftentimes, I mean, I think for myself, if I make any sort of snap judgment about someone and then I talk with them, they usually end up being not at all what I suspected.
Right. Yeah. So that's a good point, Robin. Yes, we do jump to conclusions very quickly about other people. In fact, in about as fast as you can blink your eye, within about 150 milliseconds, we're able to make judgments about how trustworthy someone seems to us. Those judgments typically are not very accurate at all. And the thing that our assumptions miss is that often when we're making those snap judgments about other people, they're in cases where we're not interacting with them first. Right? We're trying to sort of assess somebody. But it turns out if you reach out to somebody positively first, how do they respond back to you? They tend to respond positively in return. So our own behavior is having a big effect on somebody else. When we reach out to them positively, they tend to respond positively in return. And that's an effect we don't seem to anticipate. That is the power that we have ourselves as agents to make other people kind and decent and civil. If you want somebody to smile at you, the best thing to do is to smile at them first. If you want somebody to say hi to you, best thing to do is say hi to them first. If you want somebody to wave to you, best thing to do is to wave to them first.
I want to go back to your research for a moment and the fact that you had folks interacting with each other on public transit, because that does sound like a little bit more of a commitment, a little bit more of a high stakes situation. And what's making me think about that is you're enclosed on this moving vehicle, whether let's say you're on a train or let's say you're on an aircraft. And so you can't really get away from that person that you're speaking with. And so that can feel a little bit daunting as well. What do you say to that?
Well, I guess there are two ways to think about it. One is just to test how daunting that seems, right? So what we find is that our expectations of these interactions are often overly pessimistic. They tend to be, and the more anxious you are, the more overly pessimistic your expectations are likely to be. Some people are nervous about starting conversations. Other people are nervous about ending conversations, but we generally find that both of those are a little easier than people expect them to be once they actually try it. So like if you're on a plane, right, you've got a 3-hour flight, you're going somewhere, you might be worried about being able to continue that conversation. But once you're in it, if you've got to turn to work, you can just say, I've really got to work here now, and off you go. And it turns out if you do that, it's probably not going to be as awkward as you imagine it to be.
Professor Epley, I have a confession as someone who used to fly a lot. I eavesdropped on a lot of conversations to just sort of observe some really good conversationalists. And I was often really impressed at the way that people would just like build and have these interesting conversations that would start in the most basic way. But it's like, all right, you're sitting next to this stranger for a couple hours. Let's make use of this time.
Yeah. For sure. So one thing that's true about conversation is that it's reciprocal. So Robin, if you and I are talking, we'll start, with something maybe shallow, right? Which is kind of a broad topic. Where do I live? What do I do? Something like that. But as that conversation goes along, both you and I are working to steer it in a direction that's mutually interesting. And what that means is that we are going to find the areas of overlapping interest that we have, often stumble on commonalities we couldn't have imagined, people we happen to know who we never guessed, hobbies we share that I wouldn't have thought of just by looking at you, for instance. We often think that conversation is, trying to find something we have in common with somebody else is like trying to find a needle in a haystack, and that's true. But conversation is kind of like trying to find a needle in a haystack with a magnet because of that reciprocal influence we have on each other. If I say something, you tend to think of something in common you have or that's of interest to you based on what I have to say. that's what allowed conversations to move in mutually interesting directions.
And also for us as journalists, Professor Epley, we're often seeking out differing viewpoints and
Yep.
looking for things other than those commonalities to really see that conversation blossom. Let's go back to the phones to Chris in Detroit. Do you talk with strangers? Chris, are you there? All right, we have lost Chris, but we're going to go to Steve in Huntington Woods. Hi, Steve. Thanks for calling the Metro.
Oh, hello. My question was, has your interviewee, has he done any research about why men are reluctant to make that reach out? And I'm talking about people that might even be very good friends, but nobody will call each other. I find that to be kind of frustrating.
Steve, thank you so much for calling Professor Epley. Have you looked at that at all, at men and their struggles to deepen social connections with each other?
Yeah, so gender is often a thing that comes up in our research, at least in people's imagination of our research, and certainly in our experience, it seems like there are big gender differences. In the studies that we run, we tend not to find big gender differences because we're putting people in contexts where they can have conversations. In real life, I think that barrier to reaching out and engaging with other people is common across genders in terms of men being reluctant to reach out and engage with old friends. I think some of the same barriers are going on there that we see with women as well, which is just being overly pessimistic about how that's going to go, right? In order to reach out and call an old friend, I have to imagine that they've got time and that they're interested in doing it and that it would be a positive experience. And if we're pessimistic about how positive the other person will respond, we might not reach out to them first. So I think, at least my prescription, I'm not a medical doctor, but I am a PhD at least, so I could give it a doctor's order, is to take that first step yourself. So if folks aren't calling you, reach out yourself. Take that agency on yourself and be the one who extends a hand or makes a call to get it started.
The antidote for loneliness. And Steve, thank you again for giving us a call here on the Metro.
All right, coming up, we'll continue our conversation with Nick Epley, professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. And we do want to hear from you. Do you make an effort to strike up a conversation with strangers like Robin, or are you more like me? With your headphones on, keeping your head down. The number is 313-577-1019. We're still going to hear from Dan, Jeanette, so stay on the line and do give us a call. We'll be right back on the Metro.
Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham, and we're continuing our conversation about speaking to strangers. Nick Epley is a professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. He's authored numerous articles on the ways we interact with each other, and he co-authored a very important study that found talking to strangers can actually make you a little happier. So, Professor Epley, I want to continue the conversation. You and Robin left off talking a little bit about reaching out to folks and just doing that. But for myself, this is a personal thing, but other folks may feel the same way. You might feel a little awkward or a little weird reaching out, or maybe you feel like you are bothering people when you're reaching out, which I often feel. So can you just talk about alleviating some of those fears and worries?
So those fears are not uncommon. In fact, those are the fears that we find that make people reluctant to reach out to strangers out in public. On the trains and buses in Chicago, for instance, we found that people tended to think that they were more interested in reaching out and engaging with another person than other people were in engaging with them. So there was this belief that it would be somewhat impolite, but those beliefs were mistaken, right? It can't be that everybody thinks they're more interested in engaging with somebody else than other people are in engaging with them. So again, I think the way to alleviate that anxiety is with practice, is to try it. So I can tell you about our research, I can tell you about our findings, but you won't believe it until you actually feel it, until you actually reach out and try it. when you say hello to somebody and ask their name, or you pass along a smile, just watch how somebody responds. And don't just take one example, right? Don't just do one trial. Put yourself in an experiment, try it multiple times, and observe what happens over time. You get better with this at practice, but you also see what reality looks like. And my bet is that reality is more positive than most people would expect.
Excuse me. Thank you so much for that. Because once again, there are so many folks like myself and others who do. Even though I work on the radio, sometimes I get awkward and I get a little anxious in public spaces and places. That's why I'll keep my headphones on a little bit. So, Robin and I do have that yin and yang thing there in terms of that.
Not when you're on the mic, though, Tia.
No, this is my job. This is what I love to do. But in person, sometimes it gets a little awkward. So is it useful in terms of dividing people up into this introvert, extrovert type of society? Does talking to strangers benefit those who are in these two different groups?
Yeah, so we've measured personality traits like introversion and extroversion, and it's easy to imagine that extroverts are people who like and enjoy talking with other people, while introverts enjoy that a little bit less. We actually don't find that in our research. We find that people's actual experiences aren't that well correlated with these personality traits. The better way to think about personality traits, I think, are as habits, the things you choose to do. So it is true that extroverts tend to think that they will enjoy interacting with strangers more than introverts do. Those are typically the effects that we observe. But those are people's expectations or their beliefs. When you actually put introverts and extroverts in situations where they have a conversation with other people, we don't see differences in their actual experience. So I think the right way to think about personality as in as an index of the kinds of choices that we tend to make, not in terms of the kinds of experiences we actually have.
Thank you for that, Professor Epley. Now let's go to the phone lines. We have Jeanette here in Grosse Pointe Farms. Hi, Jeanette. What is talking with strangers like for you?
Well, probably I talk to too many strangers, I suppose. I just like to talk. But I had an experience a few years ago where I was talking, my husband and I were together up north, and there were several other people, and we just started chatting and about cooking and children and such. And one of the moms said that her son was a musician, and he lived in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I said, well, my daughter's a musician, too, and come to find out that they were going to be playing in the exact same orchestra in Tahoe for the summer. And we thought, you got to be kidding. Out of the whole orchestra, these two people, their parents just chatted. And, I just thought that was interesting. And we would never have known that if we didn't chat with each other and say hi. So just thought that was fun.
That is really fun. Once again, when things like that happen, you can't help but say to yourself, what a small world we live in.
I will note, if I could just jump in there,
Yes.
that's an example of what we were talking about earlier, too, where conversation has this reciprocal, responsive nature to it. So she mentioned, the person she was talking with mentioned that their son was a musician. Of course, that prompted her to think that, oh, my child's a musician too, right? And so that's the way in which conversation is reciprocal and can unearth connections that you would never know you'd have with somebody else if you just were looking at them. We consistently find that people underestimate how much they have in common, are going to have in common with somebody before a conversation.
Thank you for that, Professor Epley, and thank you as well for Jeanette giving us a call this afternoon or this morning. Let's stay on the phone lines with Dan and Troy. Do you talk with strangers regularly, Mr. Gemini?
How they put that down. Yeah, I think they call us the great communicators, so it's kind of an instinct. Plus, I think too much, and one of the things I think about is, especially when you're out in the car and somebody cuts you off, and, people behave awful in their cars. So it creates a vicious circle, and I always thought a great bumper sticker would be create an unvicious circle, do something nice. So when I'm out walking like the other day, trying to get some sun, hoping that spring weather comes around, first I run into some guy I always see walking, and he's always, you look at somebody and think, oh, that guy's a dud, or why is he depressed? And there was some deer that ran behind there, and I wanted to tell him. He said, oh, yeah, I saw that, and he smiled, talked about it. That felt good. Then I went farther down the street. This guy had a big white dog pulling him on a bike, And I said, "Oh, man, you got a free ride." And I was wearing a balaclava, which covers up your nose and your mouth. So I pull it down. Then I went around the other side, and some guy came off his back porch. And I said, "No, still cold out here. They say it's spring, the calendar anyway." And, of course, he chuckled. So to me, it seems like people always assume what other people are thinking. And as you know, we live in a world seems to be becoming more. So when I do something like that, I believe I'm creating an unvicious circle. And I think
Dan,
people,
thank
like
you
said,
Dan, thank you so much for calling. I was just going to say and add on to that, I may not be a person who talks to folks and interacts, but that's one thing I do like to do is try to be what I don't see in the world and inject a little more positivity. So those are some of the things I like to try to do. But thank you so much, Dan, for that call. You're listening to The Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent, where we believe in the power of unvicious circles. We're talking about the benefits of talking with strangers. Our guest is Nick Epley, professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. Professor Epley, back to you. Face-to-face interactions. We know they're going down in the U.S. According to the American Time Use Survey, teenagers' face-to-face interactions are down nearly 50% since 20 years ago. And that is not all that surprising when we think about the proliferation of phones and tablets and social media. What's different about communicating with people on our phones, in comments, texts, and emojis versus good old-fashioned face-to-face communication?
So the big thing we find in our research is the presence versus absence of voice. Because your voice communicates a lot more than just the content of your words. Your voice includes all kinds of paralinguistic cues. Your voice goes up and down in tone, for instance, so that's intonation. It speeds up and it slows down. And all those paralinguistic cues give us insight into the presence of somebody else's mind. Text is essentially lifeless and dead relative to voice. So one thing we find is that when you hear what people say, as opposed to reading the very same thing, they actually seem more alive inside, more mindful, more thoughtful, more intelligent, more rational, more emotional. Voice is actually humanizing, whereas text is kind of dehumanizing. The other thing that happens in actual face-to-face conversation is that it is live and synchronous. And that allows a lot of stuff to happen in conversation in the background that we often don't even notice. Back channeling, for instance. When you're speaking to somebody else, they'll be doing things in the background as well. Yeah, They will be going along with you. And those little back channels are often affirmations. And psychologists find that those back channels tend to be the things that pull people together in conversation. So live conversation reveals the presence of another person's mind, and it also includes the variables like back channeling that pull us together. And that's why live synchronous conversation is better than typing to each other.
So there is a lot that is lost when we're communicating with folks, let's say via text message. I'm sure many people can relate with the situation where you're texting with someone and you're trying to read into the tone of the text. There are no emojis. This person used a period. They don't normally use periods. What are they trying to say here?
I'm sorry, but yes.
And we can sort of agonize over this when really maybe nothing was meant at all, but we don't know because we didn't hear the tone of their voice. We didn't see their physicality. So talking to strangers, though, Professor Epley, who look and sound like us is one thing. But I think we would be remiss if we don't acknowledge that there's an even more challenging task than talking with strangers who we perceive might have some commonalities, and that's talking with people who are really different from us. I mean, in Southeast Michigan, we're diverse, but we're often segregated by things like religion, income, age, or race. What do we know about the benefits of talking with people who we know have different worldviews, especially, when it comes to how polarized we are?
So again, a lot of these cues to similarity or differences with other people are the cues we use to tell us whether we should approach somebody or avoid them. The more similar somebody seems to be to us, we're more likely to approach them. If they're different from us, they have different beliefs than we do, or they look like they have different interests than we do, we'll avoid them. in those cases where people are making inferences about differences, those are the ones that we find are actually the most mistaken. So in research done, more than 15 years ago, actually, this paper by Robin Mallett and her colleagues found that people thought they would enjoy talking to somebody who was the same race, that they were more than talking to somebody who was a different race, because they thought they'd have more in common with the person who was the same race than a different race. When they actually had a conversation with people of the same race and different race, there were actually no differences in how much they enjoyed the conversation. In our experiments,
Professor Epley,
yeah.
we're going to have to leave it right there. We're out of time, but we so appreciate having this discussion with you today. Professor Nick Epley is a professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business and the author of numerous research articles about how people think about and relate to each other. Thank you so much, Professor Epley.
Thank you for having me.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.